Hi there, my name is Andy Seacard. I'm here at Grandfather Mountain State Park, and today we're going to go over just a few of the basic knots that you can use at any point, whether you're out camping, if you're out fishing, or if you just have some rope and you want to learn how to tie some different knots. We're going to go over some basic ones that you can use at any point in time. Before we go over the knots, we are going to take a little bit of time to go over the knot nomenclature, and basically that is just the different parts of the rope, so that as we're going through some of these, learning how to tie them, you'll be able to understand what I mean when I say making a crossing turn or an elbow. So to begin with, we have our working end. This is primarily going to be the end that you do most of your work with, so that's why it's called the working end. All of the rope that's behind it is going to be the standing end. Primarily that end just stays where it's at. Occasionally you will have a couple knots where you'll have to use this, but in general it'll be the last of the rope. So to begin with, we're going to take our working end. We're going to create a bight. So this will be the primary piece for a lot of different knots that have to do with anything that has two ropes with it. So you'll create a bight and then you would do the rest of the knot with that. So if we have a bight here and we want to make a turn or a loop, basically that is just bringing that around and making this part up here a loop. So this is a loop now, or if you had it around something, let's say we put it around these carabiners, that would make it a turn. So if it goes over something, it's a turn, or if it goes under something, it's a turn. But if it stays just as is like this, it is considered a loop. If we have multiple turns, we would create what's called an elbow. So if I took this and just did 2 turns, now we have an elbow, and this open spot right there makes it the elbow. That's going to be crucial for one of the first knots that we go through. And then if we had something that went around an object twice, so if I had this carabiner and we took our rope and we went through it twice to where we have a full loop, that is going to be a round turn. So if it goes all the way around and makes a full circle, that is a round turn. So one of the first knots we're going to learn is the bowline. For whatever reason, it's very difficult for most people to learn. Historically, there's all kinds of different rhymes that will help you to tie it. But the basic thing is just taking it slow and learning it as you go the first time. So, and I will go ahead and tell you that I make mistakes with this one as well if I don't take it slow. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our working end. We're going to come around this stump here. And on my right is the standing end. So the key thing to this is making sure that when you make this first turn, which is a crossing turn, and what makes it a crossing turn is that your loop now actually goes under or over the rope. So this is going to be an underhand crossing turn. So we've got that loop, and with our working end, we're going to come out of the hole we made. We're going to go under the standing end and back through the hole that we made. So when we pull this tight, it's going to create a lock that binds that knot into place. It's very simple, but it can be confusing with making those turns. So this knot right here typically is used in this type of situation. When you want to create an anchor point around something and have now the standing end become the working load. So if you had to pull something, you would use that end there. To begin with, one of the first things we do need to understand about knots is that even though they are a knot, they do have the ability to fail. So anytime you tie a knot that you're going to be using for some type of working load, you want to leave enough of that end that you can tie a safety knot. And that just helps to reinforce that this knot is going to stay in place and not slide. So a safety knot can be many different knots. The first one that we're going to do, and most common, is just going to be an overhand knot. It is the same knot that you use to start tying your shoes. So you basically take the rope, you go around and through, and that is an overhand knot. So it locks it right after this knot, and it's not going to let it slide. This knot here is particularly used by arborists. A lot of the times when they are climbing trees, they have to be able to have a way to have their saw or something attached to them. And this is a real simple knot that they can do even if they have to tie it one-handed. So because it's easy to tie, it's quick, and it's also very quick to untie. No matter what the load is on this end, this knot is very easy to untie and doesn't get bound up like some of the other ones that we have. So again, that is the Bowline. It's used a lot by arborists or when you have to anchor something.
That's the safety knot there.
Correct. So the next knot we're going to do is called an Alpine Butterfly. This knot is great when you have a rope that's damaged. You can section off a piece of that rope and still be able to use the entire rope without it having to compromise the integrity. So it's also easy to be able to tie if you have multiple people that need to use the same line for whatever reason. They can clip into it and you won't have to have a lot of extra rope that's out there just getting in the way. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to make a bight, and you're going to leave a long enough piece that you can cross this over and make the elbow. So at the top of my bight here, I'm just going to make 2 twists or crossing turns. So that now has created this elbow that we talked about earlier. I'm going to take the top of this bight, I'm going to drop it down below. So now it is in between the working end, the standing end, and I'm going to bring it up through and into that loop that I had created with the elbow. And when you do that, after you have that through, you'll pull both the working and the standing end together, and you should start to see what can resemble a butterfly tied. So again, this knot is great for being able to section off a piece of rope. If this rope right here was damaged in some way and I didn't feel safe, now it's taken out of the line, because when you pull this, it pulls both the ends and leaves this part here free. You can also clip into that too if you needed to, as for doing rescue work, or if you needed to clip equipment to it, you could very easily then put a carabiner and clip into this knot. The next knot we're going to do is going to join 2 pieces of rope or line together. It's called the double fisherman's. And to begin with, we're going to take one line and we're going to lay it out to where our working end is going to be on my right, our standing end is going to be on the left, and we're going to take another piece and do it the opposite way. So my working end now is on the left, standing end on the right. We'll come in just enough, probably halfway, to be able to make 2 crossing turns, and these crossing turns are going to go on the back side of each other. So I have this one going here, the next one is going to cross over it. It's going to come up through the side here, and then it's going to go back through both of those turns that we just made, and it's going to pull tight. When it does, it should make a coil look on one side and a X on the other side. That'll be how you know that it's done right. So we've got that one on this side. We're going to switch over to the other side and do the same thing. We'll make basically a round turn, but come over the back side of itself with another turn and through the two loops that you just made. So when we dress these down, and by dressing means that we tighten them up and get them into the proper shape they should be, and to basically take the play out of the knots, it should look like the two coils go directly together and the X's go directly together as well. And this one, because the ropes are two different type ropes and diameter, they're not staying together quite like they should. I will tie it again with just the blue rope so that you can see how they would look together. So when you take now the standing ends and you pull on both of them, it creates this bond that will not let the ropes slip through each other. This rope is great for, again, joining ropes together if you didn't have enough and you needed to attach another one. It's also great for making what we call a Prusik. And a Prusik basically is this right here. So I have done the same thing. I have the coils on one side, the X's on the other. So I'll go ahead and now retie this one here so you can see it with just the blue rope and see what it looks like up close. And again, this is a knot that it's easy to tie, but when it does have a lot of force put on it, it can bind. These here have been used in the field quite a bit as pre-tied, and they are very difficult to slide apart from just being used. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the opposite end of this rope. So we've got a working end, standing end, working in, standing in. We're going to make our crossing turn, which is also now a round turn because it's it's completed itself one time around. And then we're going to come back through after that second loop and pull through. We'll come back to the other side, take our first crossing turn, which makes a round turn, our second one going over the back, and we'll put the working end through both sides. We'll dress them down to where they're tight against each other. We'll pull both of our standing ends. And now you can see the two X's, after we dress this down a little bit more, and the coils are in line with one another. So that is how it should look. And then you will be able to pull them apart with the knots and then pull the other ends to get them to go together. Again, you should want to leave enough ends to make a safety knot on the end. So we've got one that we've made there, and by doing another overhand knot, we can put a safety end on that too. That does not take away from the knot itself. All right, we're going to go through now what's called a girth hitch knot. Basically, we have a pre-tied Prusik here. We're going to basically take it around whatever the object is, in this case the tree. You'll pass the knot through it, and you'll grab just under the knot and pull. You want to make sure that this knot is not in where your load is going to be pulled at. So it needs to be in line. So this is a great knot to be able to use when you're looking for an anchor point that you don't have a loop already in place for. You can simply attach it around anything to create this loop now, or this bite. So we'll do that one more time. You have a Prusik, go around the object, the knot goes through, and then just pull on the underside to be able to get the knot to be in line, and here's where your load bearing point would be. So we can also transfer this into what is called the Prusik knot, or if you are a climber, you would basically use this to ascend a rope most of the time. So we'll take the same approach by laying it over the top of the object. We'll take our knot, go through it, and we're going to do that 2 more times. So there's our second turn and our third turn. So then we'll take just under the lower side of that knot and we'll pull through a little bit. And now we need to just make sure that these coils here are dressed down appropriately. So when we talk about dressing something down, we want to get them to be neat and also in the order that they should be for this knot to work properly. So when we take all of the play out of this knot, we should have what looks like a nice tight coil on one end, and on the other end it's going to basically be the same thing, but you'll see where the knot or the rope came out of. So when you have this in place and you pull on this, it should, if it's tied correctly, it should cinch in place and lock on the line so that you can't go anywhere. If you had 2 of these in place, one here and one up above, you could basically climb a rope just by putting the tension onto the other one that doesn't have it. So right now my tension would be where my hand is at. I can push that up, I can sit on the rope, it puts the tension on that and leaves the tension from the second one where I could slide it up, put the tension on it, push that up, and virtually you could climb a rope using just these Prusiks and rope. The key thing is, though, is just making sure that these are tied properly. Some folks do it where the coils all go to the outside from here or the inside. I would basically say that you want to make sure that however you choose to do it, that it's done where you test it ahead of time that it's going to lock these coils in place and cinch it. So this knot's going to be for the Fisherman that we have. If you have slick lines, you'll know that tying a knot in them is virtually impossible because it just slides through and nothing seems to stick. So this one's called the blood knot. And I've got 2 different colors here to make sure that we can show the contrast between the 2 lines. Obviously with a fishing line, that's going to be pretty difficult to be able to see these knots. So we'll start out with our working end, standing end, and then the opposite, a working end and a standing end. So very much like one of the other knots we just discussed, you'll find the somewhat halfway point, and then you will start making round turns. You'll make about 5 or 6 round turns going towards the center of the knot that we will be making. So as you make these turns, just try to keep them together as best as possible. That'll just make it a lot neater to fix later. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 turns now. And then we're going to take that working end and we're going to sandwich it in between the orange and the green. So this rope here is a little bit thick and tight, so it doesn't make these turns quite as well as fishing line would. But we'll pull that through a little bit, and we'll do the exact same thing to the opposite side. So we will make, I'm going to pull just a little bit more through, so we'll make our turns going down over the rope that you just brought through. There's 2, 3, 4, and our 5th one. So now we've got those 5 turns. We're going to do the same thing and bring it through the 2 lines. So they should be facing the opposite way, and then you will just dress them down again as we talked about earlier, trying to get all the play out of the knots. So when you got it pretty well done. You can take both the ends and pull on them. And you should start to see the two lines cinching upon themselves. This green line is just a tad bit thick, so it's not going to dress down as well. But when we pull on that, it now creates that bond that will not allow those two lines to separate. So if this was the green was a smaller diameter and a little more pliable, it would dress down smaller, sort of like the orange one would. But that is the blood knot, and it joins two lines or ropes that have small diameter and that are really slick on one another together to form a locking bond. So knots don't have to be complicated. Some of the best knots are the most simple knots. Some of the best knots are the ones that can be tied very easily and can be untied very easily.